Good to see you both, Secretary Mayorkas. We look forward to seeing you before the subcommittee later this year to talk about the department's budget request. Thank you both for your service to protect the country. I have two questions, three if I have time. The first is with respect to comments that you both made regarding the access that domestic extremist groups have to weapons and bomb-making materials. I would note that the incredibly disturbing story of the 13 individuals in Michigan who were very far along in a plot to kidnap and try for treason the governor of Michigan had in their possession upwards of 70 firearms, an arsenal that included many AR-15 style rifles, ghost guns, guns that are designed by their nature to be untraceable, and 2,000 rounds of ammunition. I'll direct this to you, Attorney General Garland, because you are undergoing right now a review about the ways in which we can make sure that firearms are traceable for law enforcement purposes. You volunteered this in your testimony, as I think Secretary Mayorkas did. What are your concerns regarding the ability of these groups to arm themselves with significant weaponry and weaponry that increasingly is very difficult, if not impossible, to trace?
So I appreciate your picking up on the point that I was making. I think the increased availability of extraordinarily lethal weaponry is what makes domestic violent extremism and domestic terrorism such a serious priority for the Justice Department and DHS and of concern to the country. We are putting a significant amount of money into our investigations of domestic violent extremist terrorist groups. We have a budget request of $1.6 billion for ATF for the work that it does, on this, and another request for $401 million for state and local grants. On the specific question you asked about traceability, we have just issued a notice of proposed rulemaking with respect to ghost guns, which, as you point out, do not have serial numbers, but equally important, they because they are sold as kits, are not necessarily. It's not necessarily clear that they were subject to background checks when they were sold. So under the rule, they would both be subject to background checks, and the manufacturers would be required to put serial numbers on them, and a licensed firearms dealer who comes into possession of one without a serial number would be required to put one on it.
I will remind the committee on this general topic that right now, individuals that are on what we would commonly refer to as the terrorist watch list are able to buy weapons in gun stores today. They're not automatically added to the list of those that are prohibited to purchase weapons. It's inconceivable to me that at least on that topic we cannot find common ground. Turning to the question of the border, Secretary Mayorkas, Senator Shelby raised the question of border security at a hearing about domestic extremism, and I wanted to sort of ask you to give an assessment of the risk of terrorists entering this country through the southern border. Important to remember that undocumented immigrants in this country have a lower arrest rate than U.S. citizens. And from what I can understand, there's fairly scant evidence that international extremist groups are using the southwest border as a mechanism to bring their members into the country. What evidence do we have that the southwest border is being used by international extremist groups or domestic extremist groups to try to bring individuals into this country to do harm to American citizens?
Senator, we don't have any evidence that suggests that the threat on the border with respect to foreign terrorists is any greater today than it was last year, the year prior, or the years over the past decade. The fact of the matter is that we are vigilant in guarding against foreign terrorist influences through all avenues, not just, of course, our land borders, but air and maritime. That is what we do, and fortunately, we have extraordinary capabilities to address it.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And by earlier agreement, Senator Braun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in listening to the tone and direction of the conversation today,